Leisure, and this is my Stanley Cup final recap as the Stanley Cup final ended yesterday, and I'm doing a recap on the series. So the series ended last night. The Capitals won Game 5, and they won the series 4-1. Last night the score was 4-3. The Capitals, after years and after being a franchise for over 40 years, having years of playoff frustration. Before this year, it had been 20 years since they had made it out of the second round. Finally, not only get past the second round, they win the conference finals in 7 games, and finally shedded that monkey off their back and won the Stanley Cup for the first time. Alex Ovechkin, who's pretty much done it all in this league, scoring titles, MVP trophies, all-star appearances, scored all these goals. He finally got that monkey off his back and won that elusive cup that, had been eluding him for a long time. And a lot of people wanted to see him win, including myself. And he finally did it. And in that process, he won the Conn Smythe Trophy, which I think other players could have. I thought Evgeny Kuznetsov could have won it. Braden Holtby was impressive. TJ Oshie. Smith Pelly as well. There was several players that could have won it for the Capitals, but Ovechkin, he led them in goals. I thought that was the right choice for who. So with that, what impressed me by the Washington Capitals in this playoff run was their mental resilience and their toughness. They were down 2-0. They lost their first 2 home games against the Columbus Blue Jackets in the first round. And in that game 3, they went into overtime. They were 1 goal away from being down 3-0. If they went down 3-0, I don't think we'd be talking about them right now. The whole Eastern Conference in these playoffs would have changed. And, they just came back firing. And, they then won 4 straight. The second round, they faced the Penguins. A team that had just dominated them, coming into looking for a three-peat. They blew Game 1 after being up 2 goals in the third period of that first game, and you'd think, they were done there. That wasn't the case. They came back strong, won Game 2, took a game in Pittsburgh, won Game 5 in Washington, and then won in overtime. And then you look at the Eastern Conference Finals. They won up 2-0 in the first. They did what the Blue Jackets did, took the first 2 road games. Then they lost 3 straight against the Lightning. You think they're done again. Well, they won Game 6, and then in Game 7, they decisively beat the Lightning. And then, the expansion team, that's led by Marc-Andre Fleury, a guy that had caused Ovechkin a lot of problems when he was with the Penguins. They got past him, and the Capitals, they were just, very mentally resilient, and they just, they took it along the way and finally got that monkey off their back, finally won the cup. It ended, a lot of years of frustration for DC sports fans. It's been a while since the Redskins have won a Super Bowl, and they've had some frustration over the years. The Wizards have always been kind of the jobbers of the Eastern Conference and have always lost to bigger teams such as Toronto and LeBron James's teams. The Nationals, kind of the baseball version of the Capitals prior to this year for the Capitals, couldn't get past the second round. It was they definitely shed off the choker label and made themselves champions for once. So, now moving on to the other side of it, the Vegas Golden Knights, I picked the Golden Knights to win this series and for it to go to 7 games just because I was impressed by Marc-Andre Fleury. And, he definitely looked human once he got into it. I remember that first game, that back-and-forth game. I looked at it and I'm like, wow, Marc-Andre Fleury really looked human after really looking, like a god in those first 3 rounds. And that just wasn't the case. The Capitals, they played better defense, surprisingly. It wasn't all on Marc-Andre Fleury, but, there were some goals he gave up that he should have gave up, especially that goal against Lars Eller that won the Capitals the Stanley Cup last night. I think they were just outmatched by the quickness and the depth that the Capitals had. They just had more weapons. You know, you had Ovechkin, you had Kuznetsov, you had Verona, you had TJ Oshie, you had John Carlson, you had Nicholas Backstrom. You know, Smith Pelly did a good job. You know, they were just outmatched. It was a little bit disappointing. Jonathan Marchessault, after being their top goal scorer, kind of got shut down after that in the Stanley Cup final. You know, he had a disappointing finals, and it's just you know, I think it sucks for the Golden Knights, but come on, nobody expected an expansion team. They got to the playoffs, they got to the second round, they got to the conference finals, and they got to a Stanley Cup final. You don't see that a lot in sports. A team in their very first season go to a championship round in any sport, not just the NHL. So you know what? I know there was a lot of hockey purists that didn't want to see them go this far and probably are glad that they lost. But you know what? It's still something to tip your hats off to, and you got to congratulate them for getting that far. And it's really a very good build off year. And you know that now that they've gotten this far, now they know what it takes to win the cup. So you got to congratulate them as well. To conclude, I gotta say, seeing Ovechkin win the cup was a pretty, I think definitely was kind of a tearjerker moment. You know, maybe not super tearful, but, you know, it was definitely, I mean, a lot of people wanted Ovechkin. You know, he had done everything. He was going to be a Hall of Famer regardless of this series. And, but, you know, everybody wanted to see him win that cup and stamp his status as a generational star, and to do it. And he did it. And, you know, definitely seeing him race the cup was definitely a great moment in the sports. It's probably one of the best moments where I've seen an individual player hoist a Stanley Cup like that since Ray Bourque back in 2001. You know, 20 years, Hall of Fame player. You know, everybody wanted to see him win the cup. He was a long-time Bruin. Got traded to the Colorado Avalanche. They won the cup in 2001, and he was able to go out as a champion. I think it was a great moment in sports, and definitely in hockey. And it was definitely a great moment. And stamped his hockey ticket to the Hockey Hall of Fame, if that wasn't already established. And that's it for my Stanley Cup Final recap video. Thanks everybody for watching. Just some thoughts as the Stanley Cup Final ended. If you liked the video, click like, subscribe if you like the content on my channel, and comment on what your thoughts were of this year's Stanley Cup Final. Were you very happy that Ovechkin and the Capitals finally shed the monkey off their back? What do you think is going to happen to the Golden Knights in the future following the Stanley Cup Final loss? Who do you think will be the favorites for next year's Stanley Cup Final? So leave the comments in the comment section below. And if you're a fan of my baseball videos, I did a May recap of the 2018 MLB season. So check that out in the description below. So thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you all later.